We're not that far into it. I apologize. I don't know what's wrong with the settings on here. So let me kind of start back. We're talking about end times prophecy, okay? Um, and you got to look at a lot of different books. You got to look at Revelation. You got to look at Ezekiel, Daniel, Jeremiah are great places to start if you want to have a deeper understanding of prophecy, okay? So for me, one of the most confusing topics when I went through the book of Daniel was the 70 weeks. What is this all about? You know, why not 90 weeks? Why not 12 weeks? We're talking about time here, right? So the first thing you got to do is figure out how do they calculate time. I think in the Western world, we seem to assume, or at least I did, that they counted time like we do now, and they didn't. Okay, a day like when you get up in the morning, you know, you got a calendar day. It's 24 hours. That's the same, but when you're studying prophecy, there's some things that are different, and I'm going to explain those to you. So, if you want to dig a little deeper on how they studied or how they calculated time, look up Leviticus 25 and 8 and Ezekiel 4 and 5. And from that, what you will learn is one day is one prophetic year. Okay? So it's a basic principle to get your mind around. And we're talking about the 70 weeks of Daniel, so we have to pay attention. Is this time divided? Is this one long period, 70 weeks? What is this? So the first 7 weeks are 49 years. Okay, it refers to King Cyrus, the Persian king that came in and took over. You guys remember the Bible story about the handwriting on the wall. Well, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, Belshazzar, was the one that story was about. So Cyrus came in, Medes and Persian. That's who that is. So that's what that's referring to. And this is also the same king that allowed the Jews to return home after they had been in exile for 70 years. So the next 62 weeks covers what is now history from the time of Cyrus to the time of Jesus. In ancient times, 1 year was 360 days, not 365. The calendar we use today is what's called a Gregorian calendar. It was developed by a pope whenever. They used lunar calendars, and some people use solar calendars, but a year in prophetic terms, when you're studying prophecy, is 360 days, 360. So if we add the previous 49 years, we come up with 483 years. So in Daniel 9, verse 2, it tells us that this period of time begins, start counting this time for the 70 weeks, with the return of the Jewish people from exile, and that's prophesied in the book of Jeremiah. Most scholars think that 69 weeks of that 70 weeks was fulfilled at the time of Christ's birth. That leaves one full week, or in other words, 7 years, okay, that we find prophesied in the book of Daniel. So if you look at what's going on in the 69 weeks, it was all God dealing with the nation of Israel, okay, every bit of that. The last remaining week, that 7 year tribulation, will also be focused on the nation of Israel, but it will involve everybody on the globe that's still here. These 7 years are two sections of time, 3.5 years each. We can understand this breakdown from Daniel chapter 7, verse 25. It says times with an S, time like singular, and half a time. You dig enough, you find out that means 3.5 years. Daniel 12, chapter 12, also contains prophecies that apply to the end times. In verse 11, we read about the abomination that causes desolation. We also read about 1,290 days. Okay, this is likely using a lunar calendar. Okay, so that's if you try to do this with a calendar that you have in your home, it's the math is not going to work. Okay, the abomination of desolation was partially fulfilled in AD 70 when Antioch Epiphanes went in and sacrificed a pig in the temple in Jerusalem. It was also 70 AD during the same time that Jerusalem was basically destroyed. Okay? But you notice I said partially. There's a lot of things in the Old Testament and in the New Testament too that are what's called types and shadows. Okay? It's in other words, you see a picture of what's going to happen, but it's not the total fulfillment of it. By the way, that was just as Jesus had predicted it. If you look up Matthew chapter 25, when his disciples asked him what would the signs be of his return, he talked about that not one stone will be left upon another. That was fulfilled in 70 AD. Daniel also talks about 1,290 days and 1,335 days. So Revelation 11:3 talks about the 1,290 days as well. That's a deficit of 75 days. And no one is sure about the 75 days, but it could be the time from the rapture of the church to the signing of a peace treaty with Israel, between Israel and the Antichrist. Or it could be the time after Jesus returns before the final battle's over. Nobody's really sure, okay, about that 75 days there. So the tribulation period officially starts with the signing of that peace treaty between the Antichrist and the nation of Israel, guaranteeing 7 years of peace. Daniel 9:27 mentions the Antichrist as the prince who is to come. So 1,260 days is 3.5 years when you use the same calendar they used, okay? It'll be during the first 3.5 years of that 7 year period of time that two witnesses, you guys have read about the two witnesses in Revelation, will be seen and they will be preaching repentance. So, and that leaves 1,260 more days, which is the last half, or what a lot of people refer to as the Great Tribulation. Okay, that last 3.5 years. So let's talk about that first 3.5 years first, okay? You may recall early on in Revelation, the four horsemen. A lot of people know that term. So the first one comes out riding a white horse, and he has a bow and a crown, and he goes out conquering and to conquer. There are no arrows mentioned with this bow, so we can take it that that's symbolic, right? It's symbolic for a political leader. A political leader is not one that goes into combat but has total command and control of the nation's military, right? This political leader will step out onto the world stage in light of millions of people having disappeared right off the face of the earth. And I'm going to address something here because sure as the world, I know somebody's going to say, well, there's no such word as rapture in the Bible. And you are exactly right. It's not. Okay? The word harpazo, which means a sudden snatching away. If you're going to study your Bible and really deeply start to understand it, you're going to have to learn how to unpack some of this and go back to what was the original word used or what was the original terminology. It'll help you understand. But he'll be working under the banner, if you will, of peace and unity, okay, in the beginning. So I want you to think about this for just a minute. The rapture takes place. That means countless millions of vehicles going down the road. Suddenly there's no driver. Okay, airplanes, parts of the air crews are now gone, train crews. What are we talking about here? Also, all the children, they're going to be gone. Okay, the children are going to be gone. If they are not old enough to know right from wrong, they're gone. So what are you talking about here? You're talking about mass chaos on a global scale. The news stations will be broadcasting this stuff 24/7. You remember after 9/11, they played 24 hours a day for I don't know how long. But this political leader will unify the remaining population of the earth under his banner of peace, unity, and reconstruction. Guarantee you. This is about the same time those two witnesses start preaching. And at first, they will kind of be viewed as just a thorn in the side of the Antichrist, but that will escalate in time. There'll also be 144,000 witnesses around the world preaching and teaching Jesus. Okay? So the first half of the tribulation, or the 7-year period of time, a lot of things start to come together. Okay? There will also be a religious leader that works hand in hand with this political leader. Okay? Collectively, they are known in the scripture as the Antichrist and the false prophet. The false prophet will organize, and here's a term you guys hear a lot already, a one world religion. We hear this one world thing all the time. Under the authority of the world leader, maybe, and I'm just guessing here on this one, but maybe under the guise of, you look at all the wars that have been fought over religion, let's take the best parts of all of them and make our own. That's a possibility, I think. But by the midpoint, or the first 1,260 days, by the time that ends, these two witnesses will be deceased. I don't want to get shut off here. And they'll lay in the streets for 3.5 days, deceased. They'll rise from the dead in front of everybody, in front of news cameras, in front of people who were physically there at the time. Obviously, this is going to astonish a lot of people, okay? Sure, the news will be there, okay, because by the time this happens, they'll no longer be just a thorn in the side. They will be directly opposing this world leader, who will very soon require everybody to worship him. Sometime after this Antichrist, someone will decease him, but he will rise from the dead, seemingly. And I know what this may sound like. This may sound like something so far out there in left field, you go, man, you've lost your mind. This is in the Bible. I'm only telling you what the Bible's got to say. That's all I'm doing. Okay? But when he rises from the dead, he will be fully indwelt by Satan himself. Okay? And he will require, he will mandate, he will make a law that you either worship him or you will be deceased. He will require people to wear a mark on their body, on their forehead or on their hand, as a sign of allegiance. You guys have heard the number 666. That's what I'm referring to here. The people who refuse that mark will not legally be able to buy or sell anything, okay? This is going to be after the world has already witnessed millions of people gone, which will probably, somebody will probably say, well, we've been telling you about global warming, so see what happened, or the aliens come got them. It'll be something crazy. But by the time where we're at right now and what we're talking about, the world will have saw war after war after war, famine, pestilence on a global scale. If you don't believe me, go back and listen to the study we did on the book of Revelation, the 4 horsemen. Okay? I'll tell you this too, those 4 colors, you see them now. Watch any of these protests, and what color are the flags of these people protesting Israel? Same 4 colors. Human depravity by this time will be worse than anything history has ever showed us. Worse than anything we've ever read about or seen video of. There will be open demonic worship, and there is now. Excuse me. You may think, man, you have lost your mind. But moral decay has been going on for decades. This stuff didn't happen overnight. Okay, you go back to about the 1960s, early 1960s, and it's a downhill slope from there. The generation alive now has already reached levels of depravity most wouldn't even be able to imagine just a few years ago. I mentioned this the other day on one of our Bible studies. This open demonic worship, when we get off of here, get on YouTube and look up the Arch of Baal, B-A-A-L, in New York. Watch the video. Child sacrifice was common in ancient Israel, okay? And this is what's been happening here since the 1970s. The only difference is that people now put these nice and smooth words around it to dress it up. It's the same thing. But this aligns with 2 Thessalonians 2 and 3. And the Greek translation reads, a conscious and overt rebellion. You may read it as a great falling away, but what is actually said there is a conscious and overt rebellion. So think about this for a minute. By the time they reach the midpoint of the tribulation, judgments on nature will have came. 1/3 of the sea will be contaminated. 1/3 of the fresh water will be contaminated. And it's going to be blamed on a massive meteorite. Either way, no matter what they blame it on, the water supply is affected, affects food supplies. If you go back and look at the four horsemen, you have this political leader, followed by war, followed by famine, followed by death. Okay? Shipping on the oceans will be at a slow drag at best. 1/3 of the heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon, and the stars, they'll be affected by this time. The next plagues that fall after these, and we're getting into, if you're talking to Revelation, you have the seals, the trumpets, the bowls, right? The judgments. These are going to fall directly on human beings who have chosen to wear the mark of the beast. And yes, there will be people that get saved during the tribulation. There will be, okay? So these plagues on human beings. And the Bible, in Revelation, it tells us that an angel will come down and open the pit to the abyss and will let loose hordes, I'll say it that way, of demons who've been locked away. Now stop and think about that for a minute. You've read in the Bible about demon possession. Well, they were obviously on earth, but some are locked away, okay? We'll get into that in a minute. The Bible tells us clearly there are 4 angels bound in the Euphrates River. We don't know. It doesn't tell us why these demonic spirits were locked away, but we can speculate that their sins were even worse than the rebellion at the fall of Satan. Possibly, and this is just a possibility, my opinion, maybe, the 4 that are bound at the Euphrates River were what we read about the sons of God who came into human women in the Old Testament, pre-flood and after. Maybe these 4 are the princes of Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, the major world powers that were dominant when you read prophecy. So this brings us, if we were in Revelation, this brings us to the 7th trumpet judgment, okay? And that opens the 7 bowl judgments. Revelation 13 focuses on the Antichrist and the false prophet's persecution of the church. This again is the ones who were saved after the rapture took place. Those who were saved before the rapture, we will not be here for any of this. So why bother to study it? Because you know people, you have family, you have friends that don't know the Lord Jesus Christ. And if this stuff here does not motivate you to witness for Christ, I don't know what will. I really don't, because this is bad stuff, okay? The Antichrist is described in Revelation as the beast rising out of the sea, okay? So it's a sea of people. The false prophet is described as rising out of the earth. And you may find it strange, okay? Some people may, that a religious leader would be involved in persecuting Christians. Well, if you find that strange, maybe you should study world history a little bit, okay? The first Christians were persecuted by the church. You remember Paul, the writer of the majority of the New Testament? He was named Saul before he encountered Jesus on the Damascus Road. Persecution's been going on, still going on. The Catholic Church has been responsible for persecuting people outside of their faith for centuries. And that persecution, it's a lot of that started with people translating the scriptures into common language. Okay? It was only in Latin, which meant only the clergy could read them. This was used as an advantage to hold the people, to hold control over these people. Martin Luther's 95 Thesis that he nailed to the castle church door, and then they deceased him for this. His thesis was he had translated from Latin to the common man's language so anybody could read the scriptures for themselves. All the racial, ethnic, and religious persecution combined in the past is only a small view into the persecution that's coming during this 7-year tribulation. A general study of the book of Revelation will show things like scorching from the sun, the sea and the fresh water ruined, a third of mankind no longer because of war, famine, and persecution, or pestilence. Earthquakes with magnitudes that are beyond anything we've ever experienced, and I've experienced 3 major earthquakes. Revelation 14:6 through 18 and verse 24 are for the most part talking about the judgments. We read next of the fall of Great Babylon in Revelation 14 and 6 and 15. These judgments will affect all the remaining mankind, okay, but they will be focused on those who have taken the mark of the beast. The end judgments are summarized with 2 images. A reaper, which applies to the gathering of those who have been saved during this time, and the winepress. The winepress refers to judgment. When I say judgment, I'm talking about wrath, okay? So picture in your mind, if you will, what a winepress is, how do they use this thing? So it's a big vat that a human can get in, okay? And they put all these grapes in it, and somebody walks around stomping the grapes to extract the juice. So God will be the one walking this wine press, okay, stomping out the blood of everything that opposes him. Chapter 16 begins with pouring out of the bowl judgments. And so this is the point, okay? The question I asked early on is why 7-year tribulation? Okay? So this is the point of the tribulation, the great tribulation. We're going to look at the bowls to figure the answer to this out. The first bowl, there's sores on people. Second bowl, the seas are turned to blood. The third bowl, the fresh water is turned to blood, and I mean all of it now. So why? Why? You ask yourself why. Because these world systems have wanted to do nothing but drink that from those who profess Jesus. So he's giving them blood to drink. The fourth bowl heats up the sun so that it can scorch all living things. The fifth bowl throws darkness on the throne of the beast. And the sixth bowl, the Euphrates River, dries up. What happens there is this allows armies to pass through the land so they can gather up for the battle of Armageddon. The demonic spirits that are described, if you're looking in Revelation about where we are now, it talks about frogs coming out of the mouth of Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet to tempt the leaders of armies and nations to fight against God. Armageddon comes from the words har, H-A-R, and Megiddo, okay? You can look up the valley of Megiddo. It's a beautiful valley, but it's a natural battleground. In the seventh bowl, there's an audible voice that cries out, "It is done." It cries out from heaven. And the earthquake splits Babylon into 3 sections. So who and what is this Babylon? It's a false religious system, for one thing. And it's more than just a geographical location. It's an economic system. It's a one world government system. So think about it. It's not so far-fetched if you just think about how things are structured now. As the United States, we have an embassy in every country. So do you not think that there could be a headquarters for the Antichrist regime and them have, satellite embassies, if you will? I think it's very possible. But I also believe this Babylon's a geographical location. The ancient site of Babylon makes sense because there's waterways there. And we read in Revelation how the merchants stood afar as the smoke from Babylon's ruin rises. Okay, by this time in yet what is still yet future history, nearly 7 years, okay, will have passed since the disappearances. People will be martyred during this time by the millions, publicly martyred. People will be hunted down like animals. People will be hiding. They will try to go and hide all over the globe to try to escape this, to just survive another day. The food supplies will be depleted. The disease or pestilence, it will run rampant. And warfare is going to be going on globally because there will be pockets of resistance to all of this. Millions will simply starve from the lack of food and water. But Jesus. Jesus returns just after the fall of Babylon in Revelation. And he will end the Battle of Armageddon with a very one-sided victory. Okay? In Revelation 19, John writes that he saw heaven open, behold, a white horse. He that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were like a flame of fire, and on his head many crowns. The crowns, no doubt, signifies that he is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And the Battle of Armageddon occurs in Revelation chapter 19. After this, the devil is bound for 1,000 years while Christ sets up and establishes his kingdom here on earth. The devil will eventually be put into a lake of fire with the beast and the false prophet. And unsaved people, this is where they're going to go to. So the binding of Satan. He'll be bound and held in the bottomless pit for the next 1,000 years after Jesus physically comes to earth. So when you hear people talk about the second coming, Jesus doesn't come to earth in the rapture. We meet him in the clouds, in the air. He's going to come back physically to this earth. This is the time we're talking about right now. You may have heard the term the 1,000-year millennial reign or the millennial kingdom. That's what we're talking about. There will be 1,000 years of peace and prosperity on the earth, okay? Jerusalem will be the millennial capital. The last battle. Well, let me tell you why there's going to be a battle to begin with. Well, Satan's going to be let loose. And the people who survived through the tribulation, they didn't receive the mark. There's going to be children born. Those children are going to have to accept Christ just like we have. And you may say, well, why is that a problem? What, in my opinion, what God is showing is I give you 1,000 years. There's no war. There's no sin going on. And I'll let the devil go, and most of y'all go chase him again. That's why. He will deceive the nations once again, and there will be a rebellion. After that, Satan is cast into the lake of fire. He'll never reappear again, which means sin will never appear again. Then you have the great white throne judgment. All those in hell, the ones who've died, they're coming up. There'll be a resurrection of the just and the unjust. And I mean from all eras of history, okay? The verdicts will be read, okay? And there's not going to be no appeals court. There's not going to be no, we didn't follow this procedure in court. In fact, I don't think but one person is going to be speaking, and that's the person of Jesus. It'll be final. The new creation. This is what's next. God completely remakes the heavens and the earth. It's at this time that he wipes away all the tears, and no more pain, no more death, and no more sorrow. The New Jerusalem descends down from heaven, and we enjoy eternity with God. Because up until that point, I haven't read or found anything where it says God, the Father, is here on earth as Jesus is. Just a point to ponder. Jesus gives us some great clues in Matthew chapter 24, verses 5 through 8. Verse 8, he says, don't be deceived. Okay? Don't be deceived. When he was asked about the end times, don't be deceived. A lot of things have got to happen. That was the first thing he said. So if he said that first, do you think that's maybe the most important thing in his whole statement? I do. But it's where he's talking about many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and deceive many. There'll be wars and rumors of wars, but see that you're not alarmed. These things must happen. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Depending on how deep you want to go and studies, that kingdom against kingdom can mean ethnic group against ethnic group. There'll be famines and earthquakes in a lot of different places. All these are the beginnings. That's what Jesus said. These are the beginnings of earth pains, or he uses pangs, P-A-N-G-S, in the King James. It's likened to a woman in labor. The pains are bad, but spread out. They intensify and get closer together to the moment of birth. So the generation that sees all of these signs going on at the same time, that's the generation that's going to see him return. That's us. It's all going on at the same time. You know, when you read some of the prophecy, I can understand it now, but you think about people that read this stuff 100, 200 years ago, it would be almost impossible for them to understand how could some of this be. But, you know, think about modern technology. You guys are on the internet. I'm in South Carolina. Not sure where you're at, but you're not sitting here with me. You see what I'm saying? So you can see a lot of things. Some of the judgments in Revelation are easily imagined. A nuclear age. In Revelation 13, the Antichrist is said to control commerce by forcing people to take the mark of the beast. And given today's advances in computer chip technology, the tools are in place. The internet, the radio, television, you know, it's mostly used for purposes of darkness, but it can be used for the glory of God. Can't none of us deny that all these signs are going on and have been ever since Jesus spoke those words. But we're the generation that can clearly see that all these signs are taking place at the same time. So I'm going to answer finally for you the question I posed at the beginning. Why 7 years? Okay. So 69 weeks of Daniel's 70 weeks have been fulfilled. They started counting the time from the time the Hebrews were allowed to leave. They'd been in captivity 70 years. They were allowed to leave and go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple and rebuild their city. That's where that 70 weeks of time starts to count. And you get all the way up at Jesus' birth, and that leaves one prophetic week of the 70 weeks left. We talked about very early on that a week is really a year. Okay, so 7 days, 7 years, right? So that leaves 7 years of that whole prophecy. So what is the purpose of it? The whole globe is going to be involved in all of it, but God will focus his attention on Israel. That being said, if you pay attention to the news and world events, you may think he's not paying attention to them, but he very much is. It's the apple of his eye. But he's going to focus on getting them redeemed. He will do anything for the redemption of a soul. So that, I hope that you understand what the 70 weeks now, okay, what does that mean? There's 1 week of that 70 weeks prophesied in Daniel left to be fulfilled. There's one event between where we are right now at this moment in time and the rapture, or the harpazo, the sudden snatching away. That's Jesus, God to say, go get them. There's nothing that needs to be fulfilled in prophecy before the rapture takes place. Are there prophecies yet to be fulfilled? Yes, absolutely. We just talked about them for almost an hour. But the next event on the prophetic calendar is the rapture. Sometime after the rapture, a political leader, a world political leader, somebody on the world stage, will sign and broker a peace deal guaranteeing the peace of the nation of Israel for 7 years. That's the Antichrist. 3.5 years of that will be a lot of trying to rebuild and institute this one world religion. There will be a false prophet. Don't have any idea who these two people are. And I figured the only way you're going to know who these two are is to be here, and I don't want to be here with them. I don't want to be here. So I hope you understand why the 7-year tribulation. And what we're going to do, we're going to end our study tonight here soon, but we're going to stick around prophecy for a little while. So what I'm going to do next week, God willing, is I'm going to give you the 1,000-foot flyover of the book of Ezekiel, because when I start studying things, I keep asking why. So we figured out why 7 years. Okay, so we need to figure out now why the 70 weeks. Where'd that come from? Why? Why were they being punished? And I'll give you some nuggets here. What you see when you read a long way into the book of Ezekiel is the problems they were having and how God thought about it. They didn't keep his commands. In fact, they turned and ran the other direction as hard as they could go, what it appears like, and got into a lot of pagan stuff. A lot of things that, what thou shalt have no other gods before me. Okay? That still stands. Stood then, stands now. But we'll look at that, and we will have sort of an intermediate pause, if you will. We'll go through the overview, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to really pull apart chapter 37, 38, and 39 for you. Okay? You know that as the valley of 37 is the valley of the dry bones. Then you get into the battle of Gog and Magog. Okay? That should be of interest to you, considering the players that you see on the military players, the nations you see on the world stage today. And then we're going to be in and out of Daniel and Revelation, but God willing, we're probably going to be on prophecy for a few weeks. And I hope that you understand this. I hope that this sparks an interest for you to want to study more about prophecy. This is good stuff. God has not left us in the blind. Okay, it's in His Word, and some of it is as plain as the glasses on my face. Okay, some of it's not so plain. You got to spend some time, and you got to go and you got to unpack this stuff. How do you do that, James? Simple. Okay, a Strong's Concordance is a wonderful thing to have, and you can download a free app on your phone for Strong's Concordance. Okay. And you come across something that you don't know, or you go, man, what is that all about? Just start unpacking right there. It'll take you to all of it. So you can do this as well. So do you understand why the 7 years, why the 7-year tribulation, why there's even going to be one now? You kind of understand that?